How you doing? Well, let's see. I'm Jeb Linton from Earthlink, and I guess I wanted to preface this with a few things. I'm not here really to talk about Earthlink, mostly talking about other people, and some of it's confirmed rumors, and I'm hoping it'll be useful information, but it's also a very non-technical presentation, more business-oriented. I wanted to acknowledge a few people who contributed to it before I really get started. From Earthlink, my company, Josh Fleischman, who's my partner in crime and our peering coordinator. Equinix, pretty much all the guys. Jay, John, Rich Rossman, Bill Norton, they've all contributed. Sigma, Rudy Flinker, Telsion, Karen Owens. From EXO, Craig Saflowski, and the formerly of EXO, Martin Levy, who had a lot of insight. From Gype, Sasha McMurr, Yahoo, Brokaw Price, and finally, I guess Steve Milner from Level 3, who's just sold us finally our new OC12 backbone. In relation to that, it's kind of Brokaw that pointed out that something I didn't really catch in the peering game. The thing that has really allowed the new aggressive peering to happen with Tier 2 and content providers is notwithstanding the low prices on transit that we can get these days, but it's low prices on transport. So that is really what started us off on the path that we're on right now. Oh, it's interesting. I think we got an older version of the presentation up here, so I'm going to probably have to flip pretty quickly through some of these slides. I was going to hit this anyway, just purely for convenience, these definitions. Tier 1, I'm basically referring to in this presentation as those who serve transit to others but don't buy transit themselves. Tier 2 is those who buy it from others. Another way of putting it is just what I've got up here on the board. Those who provide transit or internet access to autonomous systems, and those who provide it to individuals. The next-gen peering centers, next-gen peering centers is something I'll talk about a little bit more here, but you'll get the idea very quickly. And the last thing that I wanted to say is you also see the term NAP in here quite a bit. When I refer to NAP, I mean a legacy NAP of NFS days of yore in SF. The things that I want to cover here very briefly are the motivations and economics of peering, so I'll flash through that quite quickly. The cost of peering as it applies in history, and then very quickly things that have happened to disrupt the market for peering, especially with regard to Tier 2 and content, but also to some extent with the Tier 1 players, and what those disruptions are. Then briefly what I believe that those disruptions will cause to happen in the near future. Address a little bit the fear, uncertainty, and doubt factor, which we always get when making presentations on what we expect to happen in the future. And there are a good number of slides that I've actually left out of this presentation. This is from an older presentation that runs about an hour. But if you download it, you'll realize that there are a lot of slides in backup which you can refer to offline, but I won't be talking to up here. The role of peering differs pretty greatly between what I call Tier 1s and everybody else. To the top level Tier 1s, as you're probably familiar with from Bill Norton's presentations, mission critical is the description for these. Essentially, if you're not buying transit from somebody, you rely for your business on peering. You have to have it, and it's central to the business. You can't provide routes to your customers without peering. To the rest of us, on the other hand, most of what we do is we use peering to supplement transit in order to save us money and in order to increase the quality of our routes. This is not new information to almost anybody here. What I am going to propose that's a little bit controversial is that peering is usually not mission critical to most of us. That, again, your mileage may vary, as it says there. There are some who use peering so aggressively that if their peerings were to fall apart, then the capacity that they've built for themselves would not allow them to run. So for the most of us, we save money, we improve our routes, but we can usually withstand a bit more outages than someone like a Tier 1 could, for example. The requirements differ a little bit as well, but I'm going to slide over this one pretty quickly. It flows along with. I'm going to pass by this one. This wasn't intended to be here. Historically, the cost of peering had a lot to do with why we did it. what we essentially found was the cost of transit a couple of years back made it very easy for us to justify the peering options that were available a couple of years back. These, the numbers that are here are real numbers, but they're actually a little bit skewed. The transit prices from a couple of years ago, the NAP prices for NAPs 1, 2, and 3 there are legacy NAP prices, but from just about 5 months ago. So you see that with the price of transit where it used to be, it was really quite easy to justify putting in circuits to peering. This is on a per meg basis, and you'll see this graph is similar to what you see in some of Bill Norton's presentations. I use his method for graphing on the per megabit basis. Justification was easy, we saved ourselves a lot of money, and we improved our routes. But then we had a disruption in the economy of peering, because transit prices started to drop, just plummet rapidly. Suddenly, peering is not a bad option, but you really had to be very, very selective about how you did it. You can save money in certain places, but you have to be very selective about how to do it if you're using a legacy NAP. And some of the legacy NAPs you're not saving money on at all. The next thing that it definitely kind of started to happen after people started realizing this, and this is still a while back, is you realize pretty soon that you can supplement your NAP peering with private peering, and this works actually quite well. You can get prices down under $100 per meg, down in the $60 per meg range without a whole lot of difficulty. But the problem with this, in turn, is that it doesn't scale all that well. The fundamental problem there is that when you try to scale private peering on a circuit-by-circuit basis, you have a repeated expenditure on new ports every time, new circuits every time, and you frequently won't realize more than anywhere between 20 and maybe 75% efficiency on any given circuit. So there's really a limit to how far you can go with this. It's still a great option. There's no reason to stop it, but you might be able to do better. The largest Tier 1 players, as you realize, the lower line representing the cost of private peering versus the upper line, which is the new cost of transit, they realized that they had to do better in order to be more profitable. Fundamentally, the profit here is the area between the curve, between the top curve, which they're selling for, and the bottom curve, which they're buying for, in a sense. Conversely, with Tier 2s and content providers, rather than profit, you could consider that our savings, the area between the curve. So anything we can do to increase that is a good thing for Tier 1s or for us. But the approach is fundamentally a little bit different so far, and we'll see how that goes. So once they realized that they needed to improve on this a little bit, I'll pass by this a little bit, they came up with this idea for the top, we call them the 7 sisters, the largest 7 Tier 1s, got together and worked on this informal initiative called, I don't know, it doesn't really have a name, but I call it the Next Generation Peering Initiative. Like I said, it's informal. I'm sorry. Can you hear me a little better now? Okay. They got together and realized that the solutions that they had in place were not scaling as well as they'd like to, and so what they decided to do, based partly again on Bill Norton's economics, were to choose common facilities to get into, acquire fiber rights or at least wavelength rights to them for a one-time expenditure, and then once they've laid out the cash for the one-time expenditure of getting in there, just tossing cables across the walls to each other and peering at OC48, OC192, etc. This has a lot of advantages for them. It allows them to become more independent from the ILEX, the RBOX, basically any provider, any single provider. It improves their fault tolerance because of the fact that they can choose very specifically their own fiber routes and make sure that these new facilities by RFP have very high levels of redundancy and fault tolerance in general. And the provisioning time is fantastic. Once you've gotten the dark fibers in there in the first place, you have complete control over how fast you implement and deploy your services and your new peering links. The large Tier 1s, I'll skip over that next part. The large Tier 1s have a great motivation to be in there for peering with each other, and it's kind of unclear at this point where they're going to continue to peer elsewhere. They probably will, but that remains to be seen. Looking at it before and after, very briefly, this is fundamentally the problem, and you're mostly familiar with it already. If you're one of the so-called Seven Sisters, and of course these acronyms are chosen completely at random, the number of links that you have to pull up in each of the major peering markets, which are about 8 of them, are n by n minus 1 over 2, which is in the newer version of the presentation. Sorry. But the problem is you're still dependent on the RBox. You've got terrible provisioning time. You're mostly doing this at OC12 level. There are a few OC3s left over, but it's mostly OC12, sometimes 2 by OC12. And if you can imagine laying a mesh like this on one of today's metro sets of fiber rings, you can really imagine how extremely inefficient this topology is. On the other hand, if you choose a single peering center in a particular area and you have a one-time acquisition of fiber or wavelength, you can very easily just have what essentially becomes a star configuration, but of course you're still working with full rings and you have good quality control over your fault tolerance. Each of them maintains their own routers in the same room, just toss the cross-connect over to each other. It happens very fast and very efficiently. The next thing that happens after this is not applicable so much to the tier 1s as, or at least the largest tier 1s, as the smaller tier 1s, the tier 2s, the content providers, basically all the rest of us. Recently what we've had is the appearance not specifically of Metro Ethernet, but the ability on Metro Ethernet to do VLAN peering between diverse organizations. There are new multi-point fast Ethernet, gigabit Metro Ethernet services that will allow you to do VLANs, not just point-to-point VLANs, but also multi-point. And what this fundamentally does, you'll probably notice, of course, that this is not a new idea. There are no new ideas in here. But the one thing that is a little bit new about this is that you can suddenly provision a single port and then over and over again provision more and more peers on it. It's not even just limited to peers. You can use that same port for transit connections. You can use it for local loops on your point-to-points if you want to. The efficiency is the thing that makes the big difference. And if you can see the yellow line there, I'm sure you can see it on at least some of these projectors, the cost point is tremendously low. It's much lower than what we can usually get on a regular point-to-point service, BS3s, OC3s, OC12s, when you have to pay over and over again for the port. You can realize prices on the order of $30 a meg for 100 megs of peering to multiple peers around a metro area. And if you get up to the gig level, you're down in the $10 per meg region, which is just vastly better than transit pricing, or for that matter, traditional point-to-points. Another look at what these disruptions really mean, we expect. Legacy peering methods have already started to lose popularity. People have come to realize that they can just do better cost-wise. Now, this is heavily moderated by the fact that the legacy peering methods, the NAPs, for example, have a great many peers, and you get access to many of them at once. New things take time to take effect. Now, some companies at this point have been saying that they're staying in the NAPs, and they intend to stay in there, not just for the fact that they were saving money, but for the fact that in marketing your services, there's still the impression that you have to be in the NAPs to have a good quality service. This is a mixed bag as far as advantage and disadvantage. Now, of course, some still have contractual requirements as well. The pressure has been increased in general and across the board to find cheaper peering methods. Well, the next-gen Tier 1 peering initiative of the largest of Tier 1s has caused several things to happen already, and I should probably break for a second, say the ones that I'm talking about here are, for example, you may have seen recent press releases by Equinix. There may have been one by Level 3, and of course NAP of the Americas as well, which is kind of a, not involved in the same RFP process as the others, but it was kind of a de facto next generation peering center from the beginning. These centers have started to draw the smaller Tier 1s to them for the purposes of peering. People have realized that once we get in there, we have a better chance than any other place of peering with the largest of the tier 1s. Once the smaller tier 1s are in there with the big ones, this draws the tier 2s, draws the content providers. Basically, anybody who wants to peer with those above them start to gravitate towards these new centers. And this has already happened. You can easily see this in how rapidly the new centers, at least some particular ones, have gained in population just over the last 4 to 6 months. The next part of it is that once you've got a certain critical mass of everybody larger, all the tier 1s, tier 2s, content, this can start to gravitate the smaller players, the miscellaneous players, those who just want to be able to have a captive market for transit services, where they've got everybody who provides transit in the whole region in one building and have them compete with each other. And if you want to just peer, it's a great place to do it. So the question is, what happens to all the other co-location? Well, don't panic yet if you're in one of the other co-location centers, because the fact is, with the next disruption of Metro Ethernet becoming a major viable option for peering, you find that every major co-location center in major cities have already been lit with one or, in many cases, several players of Metro Ethernet. So it becomes very easy for you to peer from where you already are. There's not the tremendous need for you to move on. However, well, I'll get to that in a minute. The pressure will probably increase to replace the legacy circuits, OC3s, OC12s, with Metro Ethernet that you can realize higher efficiency on by putting on more peers. And the legacy NAP viability has become already dependent on their ability to accommodate Ethernet links. Now this is, I don't want to shock anybody, but this really isn't new news to any of them, of course. Casual conversations just over the last few days have showed that they all know this and they're all already working on the next option. Very briefly, I'm going to go over this because you pretty much get the idea already. The old picture of private peering looks something like this. I am attached to you, to him, to the old NAP, and the old NAP, I get those guys over there. I get OC3s, OC12s, but again, same with the tier 1s. The efficiency is low, the cost is high, and the provisioning time is slow. The new picture is I get one port in the building I'm already in, and I attach by point-to-points to several people. I attach to the public peering VLAN, which many other people can attach to, and if I'm lucky, maybe the next generation peering center is willing to even connect their switch into the public peering VLAN. There's been some talk about this. It hasn't happened yet, but we might get lucky. This is efficient, cheap, and fast, and it overcomes the low efficiency, high cost, and slow provisioning that we had before. The last bit is just a few more words about this metropolitan multi-point private peering that is what I've generally been calling it. It addresses some of the limitations, but not all, of private peering. You can get many peers on the same port. You can put public peering, private peering, transit, even point-to-point local loops on the same port. And there are a lot of configurations available, so you really need to be careful if you're going to start with this. It is a new service. You can pay by the port, your utilization, allocation of bandwidth with bursting. The type of VLAN that you pick is very much up in the air. You may have to pay more for VLANs. The technical options are, they're myriad, and there are many that haven't really been worked out yet. The broadcast limiting configuration, MAC address limiting and filtering, the configuration of the switches, the number of switches, failover, etc. Private peering on this level will probably not scale to tens of gigabits unless, we scale it with 10 gig Ethernet down the road, but that's iffy. We'll see when that happens. At the higher levels of peering, you're still probably going to want to gravitate towards the peering centers. Even with 10 gig Ethernet, it'll probably be easy for you to get into the new center with a single link and then start throwing cables over the walls, as I said before, to peer with multiple people. The last point on the Metro Ethernet peering is that you only get the best efficiency if everybody in the metro area picks the same Metro E carrier. That's a big part. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. I'm going to breeze through this very quickly. Is it unfair, non-inclusive, anti-competitive? We had some emails about this a while back. The fact is, it's only common sense, and it's not being limited to only certain players. If they were going to peer with you before, they probably still will. Will this increase your transit prices? No. If you go into one of these centers, you have a captive audience. You can get great competition between them. What about the old colo? As we said, thanks to the new cheap metro prices, most of these centers are very viable, and they will probably be pressing very hard into the new markets to make themselves, value-added carriers even beyond where they are today. The tier ones, are they really going to do this? That question has come up a lot. The fact is, it's really, in the long term, the only viable alternative, and they've invested heavily in it already. Metro multi-point. Why start now? The fact is, you can start with just a 10 gig link, and you might as well just start doing it for whatever you want to do. Whenever you whenever you come to the end of a contract, you can pull up a new Metro Ethernet. You can start early. You don't have to put in a big commitment. Pretty much any of the people doing this only have one-year commitments anyway. What is the robustness of the service? Frankly, the robustness on the Metro Ethernet is roughly the same as you would get on a Sonnet service. Some of the boxes are a little newer, but the redundancy schemes are identical. Finally, what about the financial stability? The vendors that we're talking about here that are in the game now, like Sigma, Telcion, Exo, Yipes, there's a lot of uncertainty about the stability of those companies, but the fact is, you don't have to commit yourself heavily to make good use and save money in the short term. So just be careful. Use short-term contracts, and the fact is, if they go down, you've probably already saved enough money to pay for it by the time they do. Just switch vendors. Technical gotchas to watch out for. The management overhead is just what you're used to. Again, there's nothing new under the sun. This is not a brand new thing, so your management overhead is roughly what it always was. But you do have to be very conscious of what the broadcast and congestion issues are with the new service, because they will differ a bit. The bottom line is, be careful, do your own research, mitigate your risk with short-term contracts if you're going to get into this sort of thing. Just watch out for yourself. These are vendors to watch. I wasn't actually intending to put this up here, but a number of these have already made service offerings in this area. A number of them have rather scary press reports, or rather very nice press reports in the recent month. Those are the contacts I just read off a little while ago. And finally, points of contact here at Earthlink. How many more? How long have we got? Okay, let me just hit one other slide real quickly. What I expect to happen in the near future, the reason I want to bring this up is because people have already started to ask about this a little bit. I expect to see large companies moving into the next-gen peering centers, mid-sized companies having a split between the next-gen peering centers and new peering, Metro Ethernet peering, and the small companies will probably start small, stay small for a little while. They go with Metro Ethernet peering as a nice new cheap substitute for the regular private peering, and if they grow, as they grow, they can migrate themselves into the new peering centers. That's it. Questions?
I thought that was a very good compilation of a lot of information that people have difficulty finding, so that was very interesting.
I hope so.
I guess my main question about the metro area Ethernet, two comments, one on the metro area Ethernet, one on the peering supercenters. Mm-hmm. The metro area Ethernet, my concern is not what happens if one of them goes bankrupt, right? Not that one that you had up there already went bankrupt, and I'd place a lot of money on a bet that most of them probably will. And so that's an interesting, because I can do the math and see that they can't make money doing that. Whereas the supercenters, there is a value chain of bring all the people in, and then other people come and they could eventually make money somewhere else. So that was, I guess, my first comment is, it's difficult to justify putting a lot of time and energy into something that isn't clear that any of the companies will survive.
Yeah.
Because I would also disagree. I think a lot of tier twos view peering as mission critical, whether it's for marketing, whether it's for quality, whether it's for cost, they do view it. The other thing is that today, it's not actually clear that the ROI is there for people who have existing tier 1 minus networks to go to the supercenters, because the May pricing and quality is sufficient. I can get $50, $60 a meg, especially at OC12 scale. That may change as some of the trends that you're pointing out show up, but I don't want everyone to think that the ROI is necessarily there today. But good summary in my opinion, and
Thank you. I want to hit the first thing that you said there just a little bit. one of the things that's coming out in conversations just recently, the last couple of days, and with Martin over the last few months, is that the Metro Ethernet thing is a new technology. These people may not stick around, you never know. Of course, you got to watch carefully. But even the RBOCs, even the ILECs have started to realize that this is an easily viable technical solution. And from what we understand, right now they're just trying to figure out how to position it so as not to mess up their SONET service. But I expect the Metro Ethernet option to stick around. You might see that bottom line rising a little bit if it does. But one way or another, once Pandora's box is opened, I think the technology is going to stay.
It'd be great to have that become a tariffed service. Although, for competitive reasons, they'll never put it on a tariff. They'll be there, you know.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Jeff Ogden with Merit. Can you tell me what the essential difference is between the opportunities available to the old NAPs and the new ones? Is it a technological underpinning that's changed? Is it just that the newer centers are newer and they get another chance and so forth? Is it a difference in the players? What is the fundamental underneath all of this that makes it work?
Fundamentally, there's not a tremendous difference. Right now, it's the fact that it's a lot of it is perception. A lot of it is the fact that because I guess in the 7 major cities plus Miami, which was kind of a foregone conclusion, people have won a common set of RFPs at the top level for the tier 1s to actually make a commitment to go into there. And they quite visibly and vocally have invested very heavily in getting an implantation in those centers. So you know you can pretty much rely on them being there once you've talked to them and confirmed it with, for yourself, of course. That is a big part of it right there. There are a lot of things that went into the RFP to guarantee that it wouldn't run into some of the bottlenecks that the legacy NAPs have run into. For example, being in buildings that are very large, very expandable, having lease options on new buildings, for example, for very high scalability. The fact that, in general, these are vendor-neutral facilities, which is an advantage, but not unsuperable. And just generally the fact that they're newer and they have new fiber plants going out to them from just about anybody you can buy fiber or connectivity from. It's mainly convenience. But the fact is, any of this can happen with the legacy NAPs as well. There is certainly the opportunity for them to move in, overcome some of the bottlenecks that they've had in the past, and move into a little bit more of this new cost model.
Thank you.
Thank you.